Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Inspire Local webinar. We're really excited to have you all with us this week, and we're really excited to have our panel. For the last several weeks, we've been bringing on people to do presentations, but this week we decided it was best if you heard from some of the local businesses that are navigating through the pandemic. So today we have with us Ron from Stone City, Christina from Stave Off, and Glenn from SnapCab, and we're going to explore each of their stories and how they've made a pivot and what they're doing now. As always, you can participate in the chat, and we'd really love to hear from you. Or if you have specific questions for the panel, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and we can just go from there. So we're going to start by just having each business talk through what they've been going through and how they've pivoted, and then we're going to facilitate a discussion as we always do, and from there we'll open it up to the Q&A from the group. So with that, I will just jump straight in. So Ron, let's start with you. Can you take us through the impetus for Stone City and how you've sort of pivoted and are navigating through this pandemic?
So yeah, I started working on Stone City in the summer of 2014, and we opened in late June 2015. So we're going on 6 years old, which is crazy. And before us, it was really only the Kingston Brew Pub, and they had a pretty interesting brew pub model. So we were the first new full production brewery. So there's a difference between a brew pub and a brewery, and we were the first brewery in over 100 years in Kingston. So that was an interesting time to get started. And at that point, the uncertainty we're facing now, it was kind of similar then. Nobody really knew where craft beer was going to go. There was this assumption that people would transfer their consumption from the big macros to local microbreweries. And to some degree that's happened, but it's been an interesting few years. And if there's any lesson for me is you've never got it figured out. There's always some new challenge. You're constantly having to adapt and modify your business. So the basic vision of Stone City was to create an experience. And my belief was that people had become very alienated from our sources of food, from our sources of craft, from the people and the places that made the things that we consumed or relied on. So we wanted to kind of close that gap and bring people back in touch with craft. And so we wanted to showcase our brewery. We wanted people to be able to see the brewers at work, meet the people making the beer. And I'm a huge believer in local economic development as a replacement for transnational global capitalism, because I think climate change demands it of us. And I simply think it's more ethical and more meaningful. And I don't think in these days where we have such mass overconsumption, people just don't want to buy more stuff. I think we realize there's a problem there. So they want to buy something with meaning, and they want to buy something with a story. So the story of Stone City was always that we were a return to craft. You could kind of meet the people, come see how it's made, because people had really become far removed from farmers, agriculture, how things are produced. So we wanted to kind of close that gap. So obviously with March rolling around and the pandemic kind of making its presence rather forcibly known, we made this, it's funny because Monday, March 9th is kind of stuck in my head because I went in, we had a team meeting. I called all the managers. At that point I had a chef and I had a front of house manager, the head brewer and myself. And so we all met. And I'm like, okay, so this pandemic's unfolding. And the nice thing for me, Braden, and you may recall, I spent 23 years in community health prior to doing Stone City. So I founded Street Health Center. So, and I worked for Kingston Community Health Centers for a long time. So I was through SARS, I was through the HIV/AIDS epidemic. And so I had some comfort in knowing that, kind of I had some experience, and all I knew was going in, I thought we could, this is Monday, March 9th. I talked to public health. We can manage the risk. We're just going to spread out people in the tap room. We're going to limit contact through the bottle shop. But then Trudeau came on, and I think he started doing those daily announcements, and he kept saying, stay home, stay home, stay home. And then knowledge of the vectors of communicable disease was such that I didn't feel at all comfortable trying to run a tap room, even with distance. And I didn't even feel comfortable, and I still don't feel comfortable doing a drop-in bottle shop. So we've still not done bottle shop since March 9th. Well, March 9th, I closed the tap room. March 16th, we closed the bottle shop. And we switched entirely to online contactless delivery. And the godsend for me, and people may not know, but the real brains behind Stone City is my 21-year-old son, who just finished his 4th year of commerce at Queen's. And he's been telling me without a word of a lie for about 8 months that the future is in delivery and online sales, and that I needed to have better marketing for that. I needed a better online platform, and I needed to figure out the logistics. So thankfully for me, Sam pretty much had us, so we didn't miss a day. So when we closed everything else, we were immediately started online ordering. We've focused entirely on Kingston. We're not doing any Ontario delivery. I believe craft and microbreweries really should take care of their own communities. I think we ship enough stuff around everywhere. Let's just reduce the carbon footprint. So we've really focused on loving Kingston, and kind of, it's been neat for us to see the 6 years of loyalty and relationships kind of come back, and to see the number of orders coming in. So the biggest challenge for us was to shift complete model from this experience of in the tap room, which was to see the place of production, to now you don't see it, but we're going to bottle it and bring it to you, and focus really on the safety on that, and still try to get people the kind of beer they love. So it was a huge pivot, but thankfully I had an ace in my sleeve, which is a very young, bright businessman in my son.
And so far in that transition, how has the model been working? Like, the logistics of delivery are a bit of a different beast, but in terms of sale and success of the brewery, like how are you managing so far?
Well, when we made the decision to close the tap room, I laid off 12 people, I think, which it was heartbreaking, and I've had to do layoffs before. So you try to have a bit of a thick skin and kind of do what's best for the long-term interests of the company, but that's super hard, obviously. So we have a really small staff now. I've been able to keep 4 people fully employed, and that's between the brewers, the packaging, and the delivery. The biggest thing for us was to figure out the logistics in route management, to make sure we have efficiency, so we're not driving all over the place. And so we have an app for that works really, really well. Sam has modified our Shopify platform and integrates really well. So everything should be seamless from our website to the Shopify POS to the route. So he's integrated all that. So thankfully that's been good. But the biggest challenge really has been to stay present in people's lives, and to manage it with as little risk as possible, because obviously people we're encouraged to stay home. We're not supposed to go shopping a lot. And I think for me, the biggest stress early in this was trying to get groceries for our family, how stressful it was to try to maintain distance and make sure everything's clean. So we work really hard in the brewery in terms of sanitizing everything, making sure people are spaced apart. So that's been hard, because human nature is to go back to the norm. So in terms of sales and revenue, it's a dramatic change, because our best margins, so in terms of profitability, were in the tap room, and our biggest sales were in the tap room. So we've had to now go from that to trying to live on a smaller margin, bottling everything and selling it. And that's a lot of marketing, and it's a lot of planning. So the margins are way less, and the sales are far reduced. And so we're still waiting for the wage subsidy. I don't know if people realize that. I mean, we've only recently been able to apply for it. So you kind of employ people on this assumption you're going to get some money down the road. We have been able to access the $40,000 emergency operating loan the government's provided, but that's still more debt, which, isn't a huge help. Rent relief is beginning to trickle down, and we've been fortunate. Jay Abramsky's our landlord, and we've had a pretty good relationship with Jay over the years. So far he's been very supportive, but there's no way I could pay downtown Kingston restaurant rates for rent when I'm running essentially a factory with a warehouse. So the staff like it because it's a cheap, you have a goal for the day, you meet it and you're done and you hit your numbers. Whereas in the tap room, it's a lot more customer relationship. At the end of the day, you're not really sure how everything goes. So this is very focused and dynamic. It's very practical, but it's definitely harder to make a go of it in our current commitments in terms of financing. But I think as long as the sales are there and people continue to support us, and I think for us, you vote with your dollar. So if people want to buy beer from macro companies, then that's fine, and I've no kind of qualm with that. But I think we need to look at the environmental impact, the social impact, the ethical impact. So not only can you get better, fresher beer locally for many of us who do beer locally, it is more expensive, but you're supporting the people in your community, and you're supporting a culture and an economic shift, which this pandemic is just the start of. Because global warming is such, and we're going to have another pandemic, or this will have another wave through it. So this adaptation, my biggest hope is that we don't just go back to normal, because I think that would be the death of us, quite literally. I think we need to use this as an opportunity, and if the stimulus comes through from the government, support the businesses that are really going to make a change in the world, and that's the local farmers, it's the local breweries, it's the local manufacturers, people that are ethically based in their own community, and developing value beyond a commodity. And so I think for me, there's a lot of uncertainty right now, but uncertainty is also when you have the best opportunity for change. And it really depends. I think now as people are getting kind of this uncomfort, we've been in this for a couple of weeks now, or 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And now a lot of my friends are like, well, what's going to happen? We've kind of adapted in this new norm, but now this is anxiety on are we returning to the normal? And a lot of people I know don't want to go back to the normal because there's so many problems with it. I mean, working all the time and defining yourself by your productivity and the way we were consuming and just the convenience of buying anything whenever you want, we know that's not sustainable. So I think the biggest issue for me now, Braden, is this truly going to be an opportunity to get stimulus dollars to invest in really the future of a local, ethical, sustainable economy? So for us, we can ride out this wave now, but I'm more like, what does this mean long term? Because there's no way we could sustain our current infrastructure and the rents with just a delivery model. So, but I think the delivery model is the right thing to do. So there's a lot kind of up in the air, but I'm confident in the Kingston community.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ron. We're going to keep moving. And next we have Christina from Stave Off. Now, Christina, you do a lot of work in fitness and physiotherapy, and that's had a shift to being completely online. So tell us about how you've pivoted and how has your customer experience changed?
Yeah, so our model right now, we're about four years old. We came to Kingston in 2016. And so Stave Off's owned by my husband and myself. I am a registered physiotherapist by background. My husband did kinesiology at York. And the idea with our model was to create this seamless transition in rehabilitation and wellness. And the idea is that there's a lot of people who want to be exercising, they want to be doing more activity in general, but they may have some barriers that could prevent them from going to a more traditional gym or going into a boot camp because they have knee pain or they've had surgery or they have arthritis or they just had a baby and they're not really sure what they're allowed to do and what they don't, or it just doesn't feel the same. And so the idea with our model was kind of building off some of the work that I'm doing with my PhD around exercise and aging and trying to help facilitate and remove barriers to physical activity for the members of our community. And so we have 3 full-time physiotherapists, including myself. And then we had a group-based exercise program and personal training that happened in the gym side of our facility with general population classes, and then we also had classes specifically targeting a 50 plus demographic as well as a pre-postnatal population. And so when COVID started, the thing with our business is that we have 2 sides. And I feel like as much as we're considering Stave Off as a whole, I think there's unique challenges and considerations to both sides. The group aspect of our gym, very similar to kind of the way that Ron had started. We tried to just up our cleaning, up our disinfecting, distancing people, managing the number of people who were in the gym at one time. But that we very quickly came to the realization that that probably wasn't going to be the model. And on the 16th of March, it's funny, around the same time, we shut down Stave Off that Monday. And that was for the gym and the physiotherapy side. And I was really fortunate. I actually teach a lot of classes online to other physical therapists across the US, Canada, and oftentimes Australia. And so I was very familiar with a lot of the platform around trying to transition our model online. And so we were very quick to transition both our gym side and our physiotherapy side to an online platform. And so we are now doing Zoom classes a couple of times a day. We are recording them, placing them on YouTube for some of our clients who are still working or who have different schedules working on shift work. And we've started to implement different things to try and create a community feel and try and keep the virtual closeness of our community in this time. From the gym side of things, some of the things that we've done is that for people who are maintaining active memberships, we have accountability coaches. So it's a way for us to still give hours to our staff and they check in on our members. How are you doing, not just physically, how are you doing mentally? How are you managing stress? How are you coping with everything? Is there any way that we can help give you that little bit of motivation to help get you outside for 20 minutes if you're feeling kind of lethargic and a little down with the way that this has unfolded? Especially as this is going on for longer and longer, we have prioritized physical health, but the mental health side of things is just as important. And we're starting, I think, to see some of the potential negative consequences of being so distant for so long, especially if you're living at home or you're in a small condo or apartment. It can be really challenging to reach out virtually. And so we tried to remove some of those barriers. We've tried to support local as well. We've done like a health challenge, which is like a scorecard trying to encourage people to get outside, reach out to someone, limit alcohol consumption. Sometimes people don't get that point. Just to try and keep people kind of on track. And every week we raffle off, for people who participate, we raffle off local gift cards to businesses in Kingston to try and, have that reciprocity and that community feel. So just different things like that from the community side. But we have noticed that as this has gotten longer and longer, we are seeing a bit of a drop off in terms of the number of people who want to jump in online. It's not the same experience. The one thing that I always loved about Stave Off, that I love about it, is that you come in and it can be, I own it, and it's like the best part of my day is interacting with our members and like getting to know them on a personal level. Like I know their kids, I know their dog, I know where they work, all these types of things. And so you get that community feel that just, unfortunately, we can't completely replicate it online. And so that has been a bit of a challenge. And then from the physiotherapy side of things, there's more of an ethical gray area. We are considered essential in some aspects because we can prevent individuals from having to seek care in a hospital for something that is related to a muscle ache or pain. So a perfect example is around acute low back pain. There are often times where people go to hospital because they literally can't get up because they've thrown their back out or they've had some sort of acute injury. And in that context, the College of Physiotherapists of Ontario and the Canadian Physiotherapy Association had said that we can see them one-on-one as long as we are taking the appropriate PPE. And that's where that gray area has, where there was a lot of clinics that had decided to stay open for a little bit longer. But eventually the mandate did come down for our college saying, we can't lawfully force you to close, but it is strongly recommended that any outpatient community clinic be closed down for the foreseeable future. And with that, we transitioned to telehealth. So we were one of the first clinics actually in Ontario that transitioned completely to telehealth. Again, I was really lucky that I have a lot of connections with physical therapists in the US that are a little bit more well-versed in the technology, communications, and things required in order to be compliant with some of our documentation and personal health information protection pieces of like legislation that is going to be required for us to ethically and appropriately transition to a telehealth model. And I was able to kind of powwow with them. I had already been thinking about this because I thought it was a great way for some of our older adults who are rural, who are going to have trouble with getting into a car, for example, and getting to the clinic, to be able to access care. So thankfully for me, it was kind of already in the works. But so we've started transitioning all of our as many of our clients as possible to telehealth. We have seen quite a significant reduction. We are working at like 30% capacity of what we were before. And that was a huge component of our business model from the financial side of things. So that's been a really tough challenge, but we are seeing some of our clients and we're just trying to stay on top of things. One of the things from the physiotherapy side is we always did a lot of community workshops where we were trying to give back and just talk about, common things for individuals who may not have access to private health insurance or may not be able to afford getting in front of a physiotherapist. And so we've done things like pelvic floor workshops, arthritis workshops, back pain, shoulder, et cetera, et cetera. And we've pivoted those online as well. So actually tonight we have a virtual pelvic floor workshop. And we sold 100 tickets within 3 days, which is kind of amazing. Like we have a huge wait list now for this workshop. And so it's kind of wonderful that we've been able to get in front of some of these people, especially with young kids, right? Sometimes already moms on mat leave are already like, this is my normal. What do you mean physical distancing? This is just maternity leave. And so maybe this virtual workshop is something that we're going to be able to maintain to help individuals who may have a harder time just getting out into the community or just would rather, rather consume that content that could be a little bit more sensitive in nature from the comfort of their homes. And so, that's kind of some of the ways that we've tried to be innovative and pivot. And I think there are going to be some of these strategies that we're going to continue doing once, we have started to open up. So that's kind of exciting. The stage 1 looks like potentially my physiotherapy clinic may be open as a component of that. I'm assuming that my gym is probably going to be stage 2, but I guess we're going to have to see.
That's great. Yeah, thanks a lot. I've got some questions around the community part, but we'll let Glenn go first, and we'll circle back to that later.
Okay,
right,
so
last but not least, I'll give you a quick intro there, Glenn. So Glenn is the
Okay.
founder and CEO of SnapCab. Can you give us an idea, Glenn, of how your plans have changed between early 2020 and now due to the current pandemic?
Sure. So I guess I should let you know what we do first. We make little office pods. So a little background on SnapCab. I married a gal from Kitchener. We tried moving here when we first got married and found it difficult to start a business back in the 80s, and we ended up going to Pennsylvania. I had a small company, a couple of guys working in a wood shop. We ended up inventing a paneling system that was adopted by Otis Elevator, and we ended up growing. Now we've grown to about 120 employees. So we have a company in Pennsylvania, and over the past 5 years, we've grown a company here in Kingston as well. This company, in 2016, somebody suggested, hey, there's a real need for office pods, and your elevator cabs look an awful lot like an office pod. So we took our, and I'm in one right now. If you'll notice, it looks a lot like an elevator cab. And so we took these pods, we took the cab and just made it a standalone office pod. So we have offices that are on wheels, they can roll around, open offices. So we have been selling mostly to the Fortune 500 companies, these office pods. And what's changed is since the pandemic, we're sort of like watching what's going on here. And Justin Trudeau came on and very enthusiastically said, hey, if there's anything anybody who's manufacturing can do to help, please let us know, because we would like to work with you. So let me just quick show you. So we normally make these little phone booths, and we converted them to a testing pod here, and so you can get a feel for what those look like. So we've started working. We've got a growing group of doctors who are working with us to help, because we're not actually medical experts ourselves, believe it or not. But anyway, we've got this group of a community of doctors working with us to perfect the testing pods. And then we're also making these modular hospital pods. And we have these connects walls that'll make partitions that go between pods to pods. So it's a little connects system of parts that you can really have a very quick build out. And what we've been hearing from the medical community is that hospital design after this pandemic is going to have to change, and they need to be able to, like, for instance, in a hospital, quickly turn a cafeteria into more hospital rooms and things like that. So right now we're still in the sort of prototyping and inventing stage. We've made 3 different prototypes of testing pods, and we're currently working on a hospital pod. We've got several hospitals asking for several hospitals asking for hospital pods now that we're bidding right now. The city of Los Angeles some hospital designers have been presenting our stuff to them. So it looks like, so what's changed with the pandemic? Well, first of all, we're in the middle of it, so we don't know what's changed. I'll tell you what's changed is that our quotes are about half of what they were. Everybody's gone home from open office. So we're wondering, are people going to come back to the noisy, distracted open offices where they needed our pods for there, or are they going to stay home? We're also developing. We've got people already using our pods at home as well. you can take a pod and put it in your basement, and all of a sudden you've got this nice little finished office. We're looking to make an exterior one so that you could put a pod in your backyard for an office. They're also looking in telemedicine for if you go to a hospital or any location where you wanted to have a private space where you could talk to a doctor. So there's all kinds of new uses for these pods coming out. So we've really we're putting a lot of investment in R&D new pods because we're not quite sure where the market is or where the need's going to be. So so that's kind of where we are now, is just trying to stay ahead of the curve of because right now if you ask people what they want, they're really not sure, with the exception of these medical and home pods. But so we're sort of just waiting.
Can you share with us, Glenn, some of the features of the pods? So, I mean, like, I know you're talking about them being medical grade and specific for office, but there's a bunch of like perks to having these. Can you share a little bit about those?
Sure. Since we came out of the elevator industry, the pods are very flexible in design, because when we remodel elevators, every one of them is a different size, and so the pods can actually be flexed any size. We can use any material on the surface of the walls. There's a double walled surface, so there's an air gap. There's a wall, air gap, and another surface. They come with power, with USB ports and power. It comes with lighting, ventilation system. It's got a motion sensor, so when you come in, the lights will pop on. We've kind of set them up for the most part like diner booths. It's like sitting in a diner, but it's inside of a box. A lot of our factory workers have put pods out on the factory floor, so you can sit in. So they've made it little work areas like a regular work desk. I've added a TV and air conditioner to mine. My office is actually out on the factory floor. I guess that's about it. So yeah, and the primary purpose of them was to isolate you from sound. Now it seems, talking about a pivot, the primary purpose that people are interested is isolating people from each other, like germ-wise, and they are perfect that way. They've got a double seal on the doors. One of the new models we've come out has a HEPA filter that positively pressures the pod, so you can put the medical worker inside, and then they can it reduces the PPE so that they don't have to wear a mask at all. And and we're trying to make them comfortable so that they could be there in there all day. And the idea was to have potentially sick people not entering the hospital, but being able to be treated and tested outside before they went into the hospital. And for remote communities, they wanted to use them where you could just drop a pod off and then people could get tested, because right now people have to drive a long way to get tested. I could talk about the employees and things. So the employees, in mid-March, all the office workers went home. So thank goodness for Zoom and technology. So that's been working super efficiently. We've actually discovered a lot of advantages of getting to be a lot better at working more efficiently from home. We didn't realize that a lot of people's productivity has gone way up. We've lost a couple of employees due to childcare issues, because they don't have the support people coming in to help. So we haven't lost people from a lack of work, but just because they had to go take care of their families. I'd say about half the shop workers went home, and now they've all returned. So we have a full shop, full production. We're actually taking on more work that was unable to get done in the States. Our capacity is quite high here. And what we're learning to do is we're having to learn how to work together. We're all wearing masks now, and we're assuming that people are coming in here with the virus, and it's like, well, how do you run a business with the assumption that you're working with people that very well may have the virus, because you can't tell. So we're thinking that this is going to be a way of the future, and we don't know. So we have one salesperson here working in the showroom. The rest of them are all at home, and they have one way to get into the building now, and there's a washing procedure to come into the building, and then we have disinfectant stands like every, I don't know, probably every like 15 feet. So there's no reason why somebody wouldn't have the ability to disinfect the tools in their work area. And the only people that left came back after we got started working on the medical pods. And we also started a internal broadcast of we have our marketing team. There's another pivot we did, is our marketing team is working on social media with the medical pods, but they're doing internal marketing as well, because we have about 110 employees across North America. So it's keeping everybody connected, and we have an employee care team, and that's actually kept everybody feeling pretty good and happy, because they have each other to take care of. So I think that's about where we are. Is there anything more I could?
No, that was great. Thanks so much, Glenn.
Okay.
And thanks everyone. That's those are really amazing deep dives into your businesses. As we start to move forward through this, obviously, yesterday Doug Ford announced, what the phasing will look like and what the timelines look like. And, I'm not sure, based on the numbers, I think even before phase one, we've got a decent way to go before phase one starts. And I'll ask this to everyone, and you can decide if you want to answer or not. But what are the steps you're now taking? Because I think, the immediate reaction, and I think we've all done this as business owners, is the pivot, right? How do we get online? How do we survive? How do we, try to keep people employed and manage all these government programs? Ron, you spoke a little bit to that, and we've done the same thing, navigating these subsidies and loans and different things like that. But I think, as we get into May and as we start to look at June, we're all going to have to start taking looks at how do we keep going as a business, and how do we manage these, infrastructure and stuff like that we've all made big investments in. So what are the things you're starting to look at, with your team or as business owners, as you start to plan more longer term?
Yeah, I don't mind starting on that, Braden, if you want. I think the biggest issue for us is the tap room really is a restaurant, for lack of better words. And I think it's an enormous question right now, not just in the industry, but economically and socially, is what is the future of restaurants? What do pubs and restaurants look like? Now that we know that mass congregating in small spaces with a lot of sharing of saliva and expressive, moist speaking is probably not what we want. So, I mean, the sad reality, it's a harsh reality, and I think it's heartbreaking. I don't think people really realize how difficult it is to run a restaurant. I think people value going out. I think they value restaurants, but there's a high failure rate in restaurants for a reason. And most restaurants survive as passions of love and commitment. I don't know anyone making a lot of money in a restaurant. I think most of us are hand to mouth. It's cash flow dependent. And you really rely on busy nights to carry you, and that's what pays the bills and pays your staff. And there's a joy to hospitality, and it's a community experience. And we don't have a lot of those anymore in society, where people live in separated nuclear homes and we're all pretty distant as much as we're virtually connected. So there's a huge social functionality in that space that restaurants and pubs provide. But I don't think you can go back to what we had before, and I don't think that's going to happen soon. So then it's an opportunity to redefine those shared spaces. So for example, if we do get to reopen and our capacity is cut in half because you need to socially distance everyone, there's no way economically most restaurants can survive like that. It's just not in there. So I think we really need a profound rethinking on how we look at food, how we buy food, what we're willing to pay for food. the margins simply aren't there for half capacity for most of us. So I think the real question is, and this is where crisis becomes opportunity, is what kind of future do we want? And for people, the thing for me, without speaking too much in the past, I think you mentioned the March 16th, you also closed as well at Stave Off, is that day that we decided to close the tap room. It was amazing to watch one after the other, after the other, after the other of downtown restaurants all voluntarily close, knowing full well that a lot of us knew that you might not reopen. But you saw people do the right thing, which was incredible, because any restaurant owner knows that they've only got a little bit of money to get them by, because you really depend on that cash flow, and people are pretty much over leveraged. And so just to see people do the right thing in a community like this was amazing, because you knew people could lose their livelihood and that of their staff. So I think that kind of bravery is the fertile ground for innovation. Now we have to decide what it looks like. What does a restaurant experience look like? What is a restaurant? What are these public spaces going to look like? And I definitely don't have the answers, but those are the questions we're looking at. I mean, I'm assuming that the delivery model is here to stay, and we really want to refine and make sure that it works really, really well for people. I don't think it's going anywhere. So breweries have to now redefine themselves. We used to sell so much beer to restaurants and pubs, and that dried up. So then it's like direct to consumer. And I think there's some value in that. So if we miss the customer experience of getting to know the people who enjoy our beer face to face, we can still have it in this kind of connecting through the online ordering and delivering to their houses. And that, I think, has been really well received. But in terms of our social space at the restaurant, I really don't know what it'll look like, right? And I think for us, if we open it will be a revised model, obviously. And part of me hopes two things. One is we have a bit of time, and I think we will. And then the second is, and this is the big political issue, is what kind of government supports and what kind of stimulus package is going to flow down. Are we going to sink a whole lot of money into airplane industry and oil and gas, or are we going to use this as an opportunity to really build decentralized local economies where you have these hubs and you have ways that food moves into market and breweries move product to people and distilleries, and that's not the previous model. So I think there's a lot up in the air for us, and I don't think we know what we're going to be doing yet, other than we're settling into this delivery model as something that's going to be permanent, and we want to do really well at it. So.
Yeah. So I can kind of build off that, and very similar to the restaurant industry, small box gyms are a labor of love. There are many business owners who own small box gyms who have a full-time job because they are pretty much just making ends meet. And just like the restaurant industry, I think sometimes the general population, general public doesn't understand, because they'll think, oh, well, I'm paying $150 a month versus like $50 at a Good Life. But like our expenses for everything are just so much higher than people understand. Not even just the rent alone, but like the staffing piece. And because Stave Off had the physiotherapy side of our business, we were able to have a more diversification of revenue streams that gave us a little bit of protection, but that actually dried up much faster than the gym side did, because we essentially had to stop all of our one-on-one appointments, versus we did have a really strong response from our community where 75 to 80% of our members are still paying a membership in some capacity to access some of our online services, which I think is wonderful. And to kind of build off the acknowledgement of doing the right thing, one of the things that came out of this was now we have a generalized thread for most of the small gyms in Kingston, and we are bouncing ideas off of each other. We're working together to write a letter to the MPP talking about some of our unique challenges as more of a boutique type shop. And that collaboration, I don't think, happened as strongly before, especially in the fitness space, which tends to be extremely competitive in nature. And so that to me has been such a nice kind of thing to come out of it. But from the pivoting out of this, one of the things that I think we're doing well that is something that I hope to continue when we become busy with one-on-one stuff is our social media presence. A lot of people, I think, became very scared and went inverted. They kind of went in on themselves and they stopped marketing. And it doesn't have to be putting a lot of money into ad spend, but for us, we're just trying to stay in front of people's eyes by doing blogs, by doing videos, by doing these workshops, by trying to just say, we're still here. We're still trying to serve this community. Hopefully we can be a help in some way, not just from the fitness side, but the physiotherapy side of things. And if you're a physiotherapy clinic or a medical professional of any way, and you're able to still try and serve your community, I think that those types of things that are important pivot points in a time of us going virtual are also going to be things that are going to serve us when we do open up, when people have been sitting on a sore shoulder for the last 6 weeks and haven't had access to a physiotherapy clinic. And they're like, oh yeah, I saw Stave Off posted a blog about that last week. I should give them a call because I know that they treat this type of thing. And so that brand recognition, that being in front of your audience, I think is going to be something that's important in the virtual space, but it's something that's going to help with the transition out of it.
Yeah, a huge part of what we do at SnapCab, beyond the products, is we are in the manufacturing community, and manufacturing is really coming back to North America quite a bit. We do a company tour, or we have been doing a company tour for years. And one of the new things that we're doing is we're going to do the tour online now. The downside is, of course, you don't actually walk through the factory, but the upside is the tours are usually restricted to about 20 people. So now they would be, unlimited, I guess, who could come on a company tour. And if anybody's interested in a company tour, you could go check on our website and see what happens next. We're all waiting to see what happens next here as well. We haven't finished that pivot yet. We're still pivoting.
That's great. I'm going to apologize. I've got a dog barking in the background, but I just wanted to acknowledge we have a question here from Robert for Glenn. So hi, Glenn. What do you expect the medical pods will be in terms of percentage of your business? Assuming the meeting moving forward.
Well, I have no idea. I know there's been a lot of interest in it, and when we first presented them, there was a tremendous amount of interest. But then the orders that started coming in were actually for hospital pods. So I think that I don't know. I have no idea is the answer. There's a lot of things we don't know.
I've got a question for Christina, and Ron, you might even be able to speak to this as well from your customers' experience, but what's the feedback been of that online experience? Like, obviously it's a big change, and you talked about this idea of community and how that's hard to duplicate, but human interaction is even more rare now. So what's that feedback been like?
Yeah, you know what? Our community has been wonderful. I'm going to tear up talking about them because they have just embraced my husband and I and supported our business. Sorry. But they've been extremely grateful. And so that's been really nice to see. So yeah, they've been wonderful. They've acknowledged that it's a hard time and they would rather be in the gym. But yeah, they've really supported us, which is really great.
Yeah, that's so good. What about the feedback of their experience with that online shift now, or even, I guess, looking forward? What do you think their appetite is going to be for this online interaction?
That's a really good question. If people are going to want to continue online, we do have some people that have kind of their own gym in their garage. And one of the things that we've started offering is online programming with kind of video reviews. So we've been able to go to a more remote model. And I think there will be some people who really enjoy that component. But I think that I would say most people are going to probably want to come back to the brick and mortar type of space if they're able to. That'll be a good, we'll probably send out a feedback survey when we start to reopen, looking for what they may want. And if there is an interest in continuing with some of the online avenues of fitness, that we might continue that. I think the virtual workshops from the physiotherapy side of things is something that we are looking at kind of expanding, because as much as we've used them oftentimes to get a little bit of community recognition for our physiotherapists, it's also a way for us to have a more broad-reaching scope to get information that is really helpful to a broader audience, even outside of Kingston. So that could be something that I think we would maintain.
I think for us, I mean, one of the things we noticed early on in terms of the customer experience is you're not getting that face-to-face interaction and the conversation and connecting with people on a daily or weekly basis and getting to know them over years. But what really kept us going in the early days was really how grateful and appreciative people were that we were still making beer and getting it to them. So brewing is a odd industry in a way, because the act of brewing is, you know, one or two people working on, and we're a pretty small batch system. It's all very manual. And so it's you're kind of doing it in isolation, and you just hope people love the product, and you put a lot of good karma and love and hard work and creativity into it. But it's always a struggle to some degree. And then the payoff was always seeing people enjoy it. And so not being able to see people enjoy it leaves a bit of an open feedback loop. You're not getting that same kind of interaction with people. So what you get are you get a lot of gratitudes or email kind of conversations, or if there's a hiccup and you work it out with people just are super sweet. I've really noticed an increase in kindness and sweetness and appreciation and gratitude in the next few weeks. But, you know, the longer it goes, it's going to be harder. But what we miss is just that feedback loop, because, you know, really beer is about bringing people together, and then it's an agricultural product, so it's meant to kind of reconnect you with the land in many ways, but also bring you some modicum of joy or relaxation. And I completely agree with what you're saying, Christina, in terms of the pandemic. You know, we need to be really careful in terms of responsible alcohol consumption. And one of the nice things about, I mean, I'm committed to, and I worked in addictions for a long time, is I think when you make a really good beer that's flavorful and not cheaply priced and not marketed as just a party and get wasted, but it's more about the experience of what it does and what it brings you into touch with, then for us, the bigger challenge is going to be, how do we close that feedback loop if this persists over more time? So people aren't feeling as isolated, because, you know, beer really is, you know, relaxes, it aids in conversation. It's a very sociable drug. Caffeine is more like a productive, you know, you're super focused. So all of these things have a social function, and alcohol really was, you know, humans have consciously grown crops for alcohol and fermented alcohol for thousands and thousands of years. It goes back to pre-Sumerian civilization. So it's a part of our culture, but it was always meant to be a social lubricant. So for me, the question becomes, you know, where do you go with that if we're kind of a little more physically separated from each other? So that comes down to whatever virtual interactions. And I think what I find is what people like about us, in terms of if they like us at all, it's always a story. People, if we do an Instagram post on Will or John loading up a bunch of boxes, they love that more than a picture of beer, because really it's about the people behind that they want to kind of know and support, because it's really about, it's connecting, right? So we're just going to have to find new ways of making sure that happens.
To follow that, Ron, are you, like, obviously the last few weeks has been logistics, right? And just getting delivery sorted and what that ordering process is. But now is the shift now, how do you maintain community?
I think so. I think for us, the first couple of weeks, Braden, were when do we start making beer again? Because you're sitting on a bunch of beer, and we're obviously, as a small batch brewery, you're never going to get fresher beer than that comes from us, because it's the most we make at any one point is about 800 liters, and it's all basically sold out in a matter of weeks. So it's always fresh. And so the issue for us, it quickly became, how do we get all this beer in bottles? And again, it's really different to make beer and put it in kegs and serve it off a draft system than bottling each and every one of those. And we're not a factory. I mean, we're a small batch brewery that has 1-2 head bottle filler. So I literally have Richard, one of our brewers, is I think pretty much chained to the bottling machine. I don't know if he's got off it in like 3 weeks. He's just we're just constantly putting beer in bottles. So in a way it's simpler, but then that I had to change totally my ordering processes, what I ordered, getting the timing of all the bottles in. We're not a big space, so I don't have a lot of room for storage or bulk purchasing. So it's refining as much as I can the economies of scale, getting labels, caps, bottles in. So our tap room, if people haven't seen it, is literally just, it's filled with boxes and bottles. So where people used to sit and kind of enjoy, or we'd have musicians in, is now basically a warehouse with workstations, a labeling machine, boxes and bottles. So that was the biggest shift. And then refining the logistics to make sure we're efficient, don't make mistakes, get people the beer on time, and adjusting all that. But now I think that we've settled into that. And I think what we're seeing is, you know, people are really supportive at first in a crisis. And I think it's increasingly hard to keep people's attention right now. I think people are feeling a little distracted. we're seeing a lot less engagement in our social media posts. So I think people are all kind of figuring out what's happening. I think there's a level of anxiety, a bunch of crows. But I think that for us, it's then the question of, and I don't know if it's like a long-term vision of who we are or a short-term vision. We know that this bottling and delivering business is going to keep going. We want to do it really, really well. But at the same time, how do you get all that other stuff? And is it, if we reopen, how do we do that on a scale that's manageable? So I think the bigger issue for us, Braden, is, I think we're settled into this. Is it sustainable? Can we sell enough beer this way to keep us going and keep everyone employed and keep doing what we're doing? And then secondly, is if and when the restrictions are lessened, how do we do this in a way that's safe? And knowing that returning to normal isn't an option. We're not going back to what we were, because I mean, the reality is there's going to be another wave of this, or there's going to be another viral kind of pandemic or epidemic. We know that climate change is going to create massive issues in terms of water. We live on a Great Lake that every year is getting higher and higher water levels. So, we're very vulnerable that way too. And then there's just, I think, the economic impact of this pandemic, where, I think the federal government's done a remarkable job preventing a depression, by and large, by getting money into people's hands, which is unheard of. I mean, we've never really seen a stimulus package that basically gives people $2,000 a month. But then the issues that come from that are, what are we doing in terms of basic income for people? What are we doing in terms of the opioid epidemic that's gone on and gotten worse through all this? If we can do this to contain a pandemic as we have, by everyone doing their part, why can't we do that to prevent preventable overdoses? So for me, all of these social issues come up, and if there's going to be a lot of government stimulus into the economy, who's going to get that money? So I think if small companies like everybody you see here gets some stimulus package, the world will be a lot better off, because you have good people doing good work in a scale that's manageable for the environment. So I think it's still a little bit of wait and see, and I've been impressed at all levels of government what's happening. But I think as it gets harder, both in terms of mental health of our customers, as community separation persists, and then the real economic impacts are only beginning to be felt, because we're now a couple months in and you have that delayed effect. So it could get worse, and then the question becomes politically, where's the money going to go? So I think those are the bigger issues for me, and that's why, as much as we're a brewery, I always contextualize this as we're a local, sustainable, decentralized economy. This is what production is supposed to look like. This is how we're supposed to get food and drink. What we've done in the last 50 years in terms of global capitalism is an anomaly, and it's basically destroyed the earth. So we really, really, really need to revisit what we're doing, and not just get over this and through this, but use this as a wake-up call, and use it to now do things totally different. And I think everyone's game for that, at least within our social group, but we don't really know what that looks like. So I think collective visioning is a huge part in terms of overall vision. What do we want out of society? What do we want out of our lives? Do we want to go back to the same? And I don't think that's an option.
Thanks, Ron. That's great. We've got an interesting question, or actually a recommendation here from Brenda. So Brenda co-owns Safety Guys here in Kingston, which is a safety training facility. So she's curious to know if you've partnered with any of other local businesses, something like maybe butcher shops where you co-create barbecue recipes or virtual cooking nights, something like that. Is that anything that you've explored yet?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Pig and Olive are wonderful. Like for me, the heroes through all this were places like Terra Natural Food, because I don't know if anyone tried shopping at Terra's, but early on they had the best managed floor. They had the distancing down, they were limiting capacity, their staff were protecting everyone in there. So Rudy Mogul and Terra deserve a big shout out. But then you look at places like Limestone Organic Creamery with their delivery, Quattrochi's, what they've been able to do. All of these companies and the downtown takeout, I mean, they're all local. They're small companies who've done really, really well. And I think if people support them, you'll see them grow and do even better. But we've partnered with Pig and Olive for a long time to do sausages with our beer. And I got a lot of time for those kind of companies, because they're community people. They are engaged in the community. They have a small number of employees. It's not all about profit. It's about relationships. They have ethical treatment of their animals. They're sourcing their beef really, really well. Places like Double J Farms on Howe Island as well are, they're delivering beef more regularly now. And so instead of going to, and that's the funny thing is we used to just stop at Metro or IGA and grab what I need today and get a bunch of stuff. And I know people were a little bit frustrated we weren't doing same day delivery, but at first I was like, oh, we need to do same day delivery. But then I realized, no, we don't. We need to get out of that convenience trap where we think everything should just be like that because we're the center of the world and we get to consume everything. It's not. We need to be more and more planful. So I actually really like this notion of more planned purchasing, whether it's groceries, ordering them. or whether it's planning out your alcohol consumption so it's not just spur of the moment, because then you can manage it better. So I think for me, those partnerships with those local organizations, we've talked to Tim at Double J Farms about doing a beer and beef kind of thing, where if you buy our beer, you get a discount on their beef. And I think if we support each other, that's going to go a long, long way. So I love that idea.
That's amazing. Thanks, Ron.
Yeah.
Just before we let you guys go, Glenn, I've got one last question for you, which is, when it comes to manufacturing, I think you have a lot of people working in a business on the floor, and there's a lot of manufacturing that's going to be going through that sort of growing pain of how do we change what we do. So what are the types of steps you've taken? Like, you talked a little bit about masks and PPE, but are you rethinking your floor, and are you rethinking like how you manufacture what you do to still be able to serve customers but also protect your staff?
Right. We're looking into, we work in smaller groups and smaller and farther apart from each other. We're staggering start times for different people. So I have 2 factories, and they're trying different things out at different factories. And there's some things we haven't, some of the things the guys came up with themselves on the shop floor. One was, hey, we're going to make our lunch at home, go to work, eat it, take all of our dishes back home, and not mix stuff here at work. I'll have to say they've been super receptive to safety things. Something that's proposed that I think is really interesting is going to more of a 6-day work week and having people work longer days in smaller groups. In the States, we do 2 shifts. We may add a second shift here. But if you had people working, instead of working a 5-day work week, you could work a 3-day work week with a few people, but it's a longer time. And then you have like a 4-day weekend. And that's something we're looking at doing. And it's a way to have people exposed less to each other. Once you're exposed to each other, you might as well stay here and keep working. So we're looking at that. Also, some people have moved out of their home to come to work because if they have somebody that's vulnerable at home, they don't want to bring anything home. So they move to a friend's house where there isn't an elderly person there or something, and then they come to work. So we haven't fully made the shift to the new schedule, but I really like that idea. And it also actually creates more capacity to build more. It takes better advantage of the hours in the week as well.
And what are the kinds of things you're doing just in terms of like conversation and process around, like, how do you involve your team, or like what advice do you have for other manufacturers that are thinking about, like, how do we rethink this floor to keep everyone safe?
We have we're here at SnapCab. We have a system. It's called a Gambit system, but it's a place. We have a daily meeting, and we reward employees for making mistakes here. So what happens is they come and they report all their mistakes, and they get a ticket when you report that a mistake was made. But it's really anything that hinders the flow of work. And so every day we're getting information for what's working and what's not. And now safety's become the number one things, because not only do you want your people safe, but all of a sudden you can find yourself out of work, because if they end up sick here, then everybody's going to go out and get tested. And they're starting to loosen up, what the requirements are about people getting tested. But I'm pretty uncomfortable about, if you had somebody come in here with it, I would rather have everybody go home and get tested. And that's another reason to have people working in small groups. So you don't lose your entire workforce. You just lose one group. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that was great. Well, we asked for an hour and we've taken an hour. So I want to say thank you to each of you for being so willing to share and share so openly. I think the one thing as a group that we've really come together around is this idea of community and providing information to other local businesses and people that we all are navigating this together. And so I really appreciate you all coming on and sharing with us. I think it's super important, and and it really helps a lot of other small businesses as they are trying to navigate the same things that we are all. So thank you so much.
Totally.
Great.
Thank you for doing this. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Katie.
See
Awesome.
you later. Thanks again, guys.
Bye.
Bye.